Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Create Your Best Chapter podcast. My name is Vera Ilnyckyj, and I am a life and career coach, and I work with women that are primarily in midlife. I also work with women who are entrepreneurs, and I really support them in creating the next and best chapter of their life, which I love doing. And in this podcast, I have conversations with amazing women who have started their new chapters and are doing really amazing work in the world. And the intention of this podcast and these conversations is to inspire you and motivate you and to also remind you that you're not alone on this journey because everyone's going through something. And I feel if we can have even a little dose of inspiration and motivation on a weekly basis, that it's really helpful and it helps us create really positive ripples into the world. So today, my guest is Bri Falls. She is the co founder of a company called the Leeg Group here in Calgary. Now, Leeg is building the future of work by redefining how talent and businesses collaborate. The Leeg approach transforms traditional work models, bridging the gap between businesses' needs and top-tier talent, creating a new paradigm of efficiency, flexibility, and mutual growth. Bri is a senior executive leader with a highly sought-after background in partnerships, stakeholder and change management, and large-scale project execution. She has 20 years experience in both startup and corporate organizations and has successfully led and enabled business growth, partnerships, and transformation initiatives. Before her move into startup, Bri spent 16 years in oil and gas, driving large-scale organizational initiatives aligned to transforming teams and improving execution. So, Bri, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited for this. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, so tell us about this new chapter of your life where you have stepped into co-founding a startup. I'm so curious what drove you to make that decision.
Yeah, no, it was definitely. I originally stepped into tech into a larger organization, Neo Financial, which I'm sure a lot of you had heard. And so that was when I made the most drastic step over. And then I would say this has just been, I went there, I went to Creative Destruction Lab and really just kind of understanding the space and what's in it. And so from that, it was just feeling really empowered. I've always wanted to do my own thing, and it was just the time where I finally felt compelled, like it was the right time to try. And there's a great opportunity, especially with where things are today. And we had some great idea and jumped right in, both feet.
How do you know it's the right time? Like you said, it just felt like the right time. Like, how do you know that it's the right time to make a change like this?
Yeah, and I think for me, it's like a culmination of a bunch of things where it's like, I don't know that it was like a hit you over the head moment per se, that it's like boom and birds were flying and that meant it was the right time. I think it was more of like a culmination of events that have happened over the course of my life and just like really trying to be in tune with myself and like figuring out what that needs to look like. I lost my dad when I was 26, and so then there was like an impact there from that kind of thing. I have two kids. And so when my second child was born, he was actually born, we found out at 36 weeks pregnant that he had a huge tumor in utero. And so like had to have that removed and it was actually malignant. And so going through that whole process with him at the Children's Hospital, which he's wonderful now and everything's great. But I would say, you have these things that happen throughout your life and they give you lessons. And those are obviously two pretty extreme things that happened over the course of time. But with those things, I think it just left a really strong impression on me in the sense that, we're lucky to be here. We only have 80 years to live. And your values get thrown into such stark reality in those kind of situations where you really can cut through the noise and see what matters and what's important and how much of what we worry and fret ourselves about just really does not matter at the end of the day. And so, those were not things I would necessarily wish for people to experience, but I'm grateful for the lessons I took from them. And I do definitely think they had a huge impact on me and making these moves in my life into these different spaces because why wait? If
Mm.
you feel, and I've always felt it inside. And so I think, always having that feeling like, oh, I think I could do something of my own. I am a bossy lady. Like maybe I would like to keep, and those kind of things. Like, I think that really was something where I felt like compelled, but maybe not brave enough to go. And having those kind of experiences really just help put things into perspective. And it's like, what's the worst that could happen? That's kind of always what I tell my kids. It's like, what's the worst that can happen? The sun keeps coming up and down regardless of whatever happens that day. So, it's kind of, maybe people don't find that comforting, but I find it incredibly comforting that it does.
Hmm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And it is really interesting how when these big types of events happen in our life that are so traumatic
Yeah.
that people can look at them in one of two ways. You can look at it as I'm a victim and this is terrible and how can this be happening to me and poor me and all these kind of victim mindset things. Or you can take your approach, which is, okay, this is happening right now. How do I choose to deal with the situation? What am I going to learn from it? And what's the gift
Yeah.
in this situation, even though it's really, really hard?
Yeah. And I don't think you have clarity of all the answers to all those questions in the moments either. And so like for me, that's why it wasn't like aha, this is the next step. It was more like I do a lot. I'm kind of like a scientist of my own life. Like I'm always just like approaching things like they're a science experiment, I feel like in general. And so with that, it's just like, okay, well, like, what do I know? And like with my dad, it was just a lot of feeling it. Like I don't think I really
Mm.
figured that out for a couple of years after how I felt about it. And same with Arthur. When I was in the moment, I was just laser hell. I was like Braveheart coming down the hill, screaming with like page across my face, like, we are going to figure this out. But like, it wasn't until after that I had that clarity. So I think that's like an important part is like, you're not going to always have those answers. I think the most important thing is that you're checking in and you're thinking about it and you're understanding in the moment, like you're more reacting in the moment, especially in those kind of situations. Like it's reflection is required in whatever way works for you, to come to those conclusions.
How do you sit back and reflect and tune into yourself then?
I think I think I just have a continual stream running in my brain, which I know for my team is probably frightening because it's a constant like blah, going on all the time. But I would say for me, because I do kind of naturally just approach things that way. I'm always kind of poking, asking, and like I have a lot of people in my life too. Like I have a ton of people in my life that I ask questions, that I talk to about things. I seek out different sources of that kind of feedback loops. Because for me, it's all data gathering. It's like,
Mhm.
how can I know what I feel and I feel very confident about my own feelings, but at the same time, you don't see yourself clearly always. You only see your situation sometimes. And if you have a lot of emotion tied to the situation, that extra makes it unclear. So I try to just always have that in my life. And that's a combination of friends, um, mentors, people I work with, peers, like my family. Like there's a whole lens of people who contribute to that picture, but I'm asking them questions and I'm genuinely wanting to hear their answer. And I'm looking to see if there's themes. Like not all
Mhm.
feedback is feedback you need to take, but I think you decide that on who you're asking for feedback and if you trust them and all those kind of things. Like that's really how you can try to create a good thesis, if you will, of the situation.
I love that, and I always say that community is so important, and who you surround yourself with really determines how you show up in the world and how
Yeah.
you learn these lessons. And so I like how you say, like, you're intentional about who you ask. You don't just ask anybody. I know for me, I've become over the last decade and a half very intentional about who do I want in my space?
Yeah.
Who do I trust? Who do I ask those questions to? It's not just anybody, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like as women, I get a lot of feedback unsolicited that I
Mm.
don't ask for. And so like as a female, you have to like recognize what is that feedback that is right, what is something that's really more of a reflection of them or their reaction to me. Like there's a lot of that. And that was actually a huge thing that I had to learn just as a woman in the world, but woman coming up in, my career is I internalized a lot of that feedback, creating a
Mm.
picture in my mind of myself of what I thought that meant. And then I came to realize like how untrue that picture is and also not asking enough people. So just receiving, not seeking enough feedback, but just receiving feedback. And the ones who give unsolicited feedback are usually not the ones you want to listen to their feedback sometimes.
Mhm.
And so that was a big learning for me to change that mental model of myself, I would say, because a lot of the time, and I tell that to my daughter all the time, it's like the reflection of what people say to you really has 80% to do with them more than it has to do with actually who you are and what you're up to. They don't know.
It's so true, and then we do tend to listen to all this external noise and all this unsolicited advice and all these feedback, and I think with social media, it's almost even worse because we just are surrounded by this feedback all the time.
Yeah, all the time. And I I'm very addicted to Instagram, I will say. I love looking at things on Instagram. But at the same time, I hate social media and I hate that noise in my mind. And like, I remember the internet coming in, so I remember what it was like to not have internet, and it was a peaceful space, and it was nice to be in your own head. And I am naturally aligned more to the arts. Like that was my original career path, was I wanted to be an artist, and I did the
Mm,
whole I went to art school and I was going to do that. And I think when you're that kind of person too, like I actually prefer to just live in my own head without the noise, or quietly in the world and being able to absorb without having people thrust. So I find it very chaotic feeling now, having like too many, socials and Slack and this and that. It's a
mm.
overload for my brain.
How do you get out of that overload? Like, do you have an intentional practice where you're not on social media, or how do you kind of filter that out?
Yeah, like for me, I find I I'm it's hard not to. I find when I'm tired or this and that, it's like it's such an easy dopamine fix to make yourself feel a little more up. And so for me, translating into reading on my Kindle instead, because I was a huge reader. And so being able to do that instead of doing that, I can just read my book on my phone. That's been a great way to start, like, getting myself out of the checking
Mm,
or looking at different things, LinkedIn or whatever. And then from that, then you kind of just like set it down. And like with the kids, it's a really great like flag right away. It's like they want your attention, they want your time. And do I feel like I'm actually giving you my focused attention, or am I just kind of like zoning out? And like, no, we're a two working family. There's no shame on that when that happens. But at the same time, trying to be intentional about it, put the phone away and like go outside. That's the biggest thing. Go outside.
yeah. Go outside. Yeah. Be in nature. Put the phone down. You mentioned values a little while ago, and that's really interesting to me because I'm a big believer in knowing what your values are and then living by your values every day. And I'm curious how you came to know what your values were, and how do you live those values every day?
Yeah. And that's interesting because I don't know if I would have been as intentional thinking about my values had I not become a parent, because I feel like you're trying to teach your kids values. So then I like actually like really thought about them in a real way. For myself, that was my own experience. But I would say kindness is like and care is like one of my top values, where I don't know, I feel like it does not hurt for us to operate in that operating model in the world. And I don't know what's going on in people's lives. And maybe some of the things that I had happen in my life earlier has given me some of that perspective, but it's just, I don't know. And did you do something to annoy me, or that was annoying when you cut me off, or this or that in life? Like, yes, but maybe you're having the worst day of your life. So benefit of the doubt is always big. I feel like I always give. So kindness and care, and then integrity, and just being like honest and authentic. Cause I think those are good values to stand by. And it's more just how those are the type of people I gravitate towards. That's what I find, makes me feel good. And there's been a learning, over the course of my life, to figure out what kind of people make me feel good and what kind of people, when I spend time with them, I'm like, oh, I kind of feel like shit after hanging
Mm.
out with you. Like, why is that? I like you, but why is that? And so it took a while for me to figure that out.
Yeah. It's like you said, you reflect back and you become a scientist of your own life. Like, okay, why am I feeling this way?
Why?
Right? And just really becoming more self-aware. That's really what it's about. Like becoming aware of like what feeds me, what doesn't feed me, what overwhelms me, what grounds me, what calms me down, and then leaning into practices that are going to support that, right?
Yeah. And I think underlying all of it for all of these things is that self-awareness, and just having that, like, do I even understand myself that well? Like a lot of time you're just living, you're not actually thinking about these things about you. Like, what's your operating model? How do you go about in the world? How do you show up? Like, if you're just reacting to life, you don't necessarily spend time thinking about those things, but it helps.
Have you found that being a co-founder of a business has really increased your amount of self-awareness or increased the amount of self-awareness you think you need?
100%. And I would say, if it was just my partner and I, Nigel, he's wonderful. But that's easier, right? Because we can just be like buds. But the fact that, we have a team, I think it's just being a leader, let alone a co founder. If you're going to lead anything, um, all of a sudden your own personal behavior impacts people so much more than if you're just an individual contributor in the world. Like the way I show up, the way I message, the way I email, the way I start
Mhm.
up meeting, the way I effectively communicate, that all has so much more impact on others now because they're looking to me to, guide, lead, make decisions. And so I'm constantly looking for those feedback loops because at the end of the day, I am a bit of a I'm a high achiever striver and so like I want us to do our best and I want us to win and so if I want that kind of performance out of the team, I'm really the key foundation to enabling that. That doesn't mean there aren't performance things that can happen obviously in organizations, but that's always my first check. If things aren't going the way we want it to, it's like, well, am I doing my job? Because my job's to set you up for success. So if I've done everything and then you're still not succeeding, then we should chat. But if I've done not, then that's on me and I have to go back and take a look at that.
That's really powerful and such an like back to your word of empowerment. That's such an empowering way to be, taking responsibility for your actions first, which can be also very challenging because sometimes it's easier just to blame the person or blame the situation. Like, well, it's not my fault
Totally.
versus no, actually, what role do I play in this?
Yeah. And I think that's just like going back to that like problem solving. It's just like, well, what is the problem here? And don't focus on the drip. Like, where's it
Mm,
actually broken? Like, the drip might be traveling down the pipe a bit and it's not actually dripping where it's broken. And so, are you just slapping a band aid on the drip, but you're not actually fixing the break? Like, that's, I think, the most important thing is just where is it broken? And like don't put any blame on it until you
mm.
understand like where it's truly broken. Even then, is blame even necessary? Like you just got to fix it. Like, like what's the value in doing that? I think there's a lot more constructive ways to deal with it. Not that accountability doesn't exist in those situations, but blame doesn't need to exist in those situations.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. What has been the biggest lesson so far in your journey in this new chapter of being a co-founder of a business?
Ooh, probably I think like just that belief in yourself and then showing up authentically. Like I think that's been something that's been really interesting is like um being really empowered to feel like yourself. And that's something I found very interesting being in tech. I find, in the tech kind of personas of the world and the way that, that kind of industry sector has worked, there's not necessarily it's false authenticity or it's like the
Mhm.
way you want to be viewed, a little bit is what I found from being in the space. And I think there's just such a power the more I have felt empowered and to show up as myself and my full self over the course of my career, the more success I have had in my career. And so I think that was like such a powerful lesson for me to learn. You feel like maybe you need to shield it a little bit or you need to show up a certain way or a way that appeases others in order to get to head. But actually just being my, kind of bossy, go get it done self has actually done a lot more for me that way.
That's such amazing wisdom because you're right. I think sometimes we think we need to show up in the world in a certain way. We put these shoulds on ourselves versus, you know what? Maybe people aren't going to like me if I just show up the way that I am or say something that I really believe in. But the people that are meant to be in your community and be in your circle and work with you are going to be attracted to that.
100%. And I think it's like when you say those kind of things, I think it's like people maybe take it to the extremes, It's like, well, that means I can say any thought that goes like, I don't want
Mm,
that that's what that means because that's not what that means. It doesn't mean respect and integrity and all these things go out the window in that. But it means, I'm showing up in a way, I'm speaking in a way, I'm connecting with people in a way that is very authentic to me. And for me, I'm pretty direct and I don't like, dancing around conversations and I would rather just have like a very lovely heart to heart conversation about it. But like, we're not going to, not talk about the problem here, laser focused on solving what the problem is. And so that's my operating model that works best for me. And speaking my mind. That's the thing too, is like, I know I'm sure Nigel wishes, I probably didn't speak my mind so much to him. It's a lot maybe as a partner to have to deal with, but it's the way that I show up in the world, and I'm also like, almost 40 now, so tracks have been set. I can only change so many things about myself. Some I'm
Yeah,
accepting.
exactly, exactly. So what words of advice or wisdom would you give to women who are either creating their next chapter or thinking about making a big change or a big leap in their life? Like what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think it's, I don't think you should make I've made some pretty bold moves in as far as like career and totally shifting, or even, earlier life moves as far as just like big personal changes. And so with that, I think it's like don't rush into it necessarily, but also don't be afraid. Like, and not that you don't rush, but like get your data points, but then be brave. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, I'm like, don't just do something and jump off a cliff and not like look over the cliff and see what's down there and see where you want to jump to, and like make sure you do some of those things, but there's going to be that space after that you just don't know. And I don't know, for me, I always try to think like, when I'm 80, one, will I even remember this, and two, will I even care, or will I care in a positive way? And if it doesn't gut check those, like, I'm not, otherwise I'm not worrying about it too much. It's like whatever, I'm
Mm.
here to experience every experience I can get in this life. I'm lucky to be here. I'm lucky to get to walk around and have all these wonderful things I have in my life. Like, what is the worst that's going to happen? I have a family who loves me, a wonderful community, friends and colleagues, and all of these amazing things. So like, I don't care.
That's amazing advice. Tell me a little bit about League. Like who do you serve and what's your vision? Like what do you want to do? What kind of change do you want to make in the world with League?
Yeah, and like Leeg really is here to build the future of work. And so, you know, the predominant model for employment that we have been in for these days, it really is changing in the sense of the way that it's meeting expectations and needs. And so we're really about smarter work. We want to find different ways for companies to hire or bring people in, and we want to find different ways for individuals to source and find work. You think about the future, it's flexible, fluid, on demand, and that's not really different from what the expectations to work is going to either. Whether you want to call it the Uber for business or like a gig economy for business, there's a need for that quality, super high quality, exceptional outcomes, but also in a way like you need it when you need it, and a way that you can create more flexibility in people's lives that way. And so, you know, obviously we want to be able to create some really incredible outcomes for customers and clients that we're working for. And as an individual, I feel like there's such a space to create such a more meaningful work experience for people, in a way that actually serves company outcomes like far greater, where you can actually be working and thinking more about skills and like, what are you actually, I feel like we've kind of gone away, and I hear a lot of feedback of people saying, I was putting out resumes and it was looking for a junior role, but they needed 35 years experience, a PhD in this and this and that. It's kind of like we've gone the way of everyone has to be good at everything, and that expert
Mhm.
like lens is like, you need to be a unicorn and we only need unicorns. And we're kind of switching on its head, where it's like everyone's an expert in specific lanes, but someone who's like a dev may not be a partnerships expert, like they can't necessarily cross the line in the way that you need always. So, and they don't want to, and they don't need to, it's like, if that's not their core, you know skill set or something they're even striving for, I'm hearing a lot of people, feel discontent at work because they are getting put in these positions where it's like, well, I'm hired for this, but then all of a sudden I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and I hate those things. And now I'm miserable because that's how much I hate them and I want to move on. And so really focusing on your Vera, your skills are coaching, helping develop and empower individuals. Well, we're going to make you an expert in that, and we're going to source and find roles that do that, and we can do it fluid and on demand for that company. So you don't need one person who can do everything. We have 10 people who can cover that skill set, and we have a way to manage that, where you have the knowledge retention, you have the ability to move quickly and swiftly, and with people who have been kept apprised of what needs to happen. So we're doing all of that for you, so it becomes very easy then. Well, not easy to the customer. It was a lot for us to figure out this model and to set it up, but a way for us to create some really interesting and unique ways of creating this gig economy, if you will, where we can embed talent and then leverage a large, call it a tech stack of people, whatever you want to call it, behind the scenes, or coming in and out of that organization. So it really, people are filling their cup with that flexible kind of role that they want to have. They're choosing the work they want to work on, and we're filling up that pipeline with the work they love. And companies are getting quality at a much more affordable cost than they would have otherwise, and in real time, and moving at the pace that they wanted to. So we've been finding a lot of really exciting success with that, and we're just working on how we're going to scale and grow it even further.
That's really cool. And what I'm hearing out of all of that is something about fulfillment. And I know you didn't use that word, but when you're tapping into your unique strengths and your authenticity and what you're really good at and what you really want to do, that's where people feel fulfilled and purposeful. And I work with a lot of clients that don't feel that way. And I love that you're supporting that, because that really is how awesome work gets done, is when you're doing the thing that you're meant to be doing and you feel purposeful, you feel fulfilled, and you feel valued for it, right?
You feel valued for it. And that's the other piece too, is like we're decoupling a bit, in businesses. You're trying at the end of the day, the business results are what drive the business and keep everyone employed. But that doesn't necessarily mean, like, a lot of the time it's at conflict with maybe some of the other things that having a workforce entails. You have people, and people have people problems and people concerns and people development and people growth, and that's really what we're hearing is, my needs as an individual aren't necessarily being met in this model, but the business outcomes are, and that's ultimately
Mhm.
what's always going to drive it. And so with that, we're able to set up a lot of intention by removing that piece from the business. We take it out, we manage that. Think of it like an agent for you as an individual, and we're really there to be with you as a partner along that journey. We're not motivated by internally of your company. We set up the infrastructure to support you on this journey, having someone to meet with all the time, access to people like yourself, Vera, where you can talk to a coach and do those sorts of things, get development coaching. We have training, guidance, as well as benefits and like retirement savings. So really just take that whole people piece out of the company, to support people that way, because that's really the experience people are looking for. And it's hard. It's really hard to manage that by yourself and without having those kind of feedback loops. And there's a lot of different people on that trajectory. So, how do you help them in that way? And this has been a really great way for us to look at how we can do that. And when you do that for companies, you unlock a lot of value. So, it's a win win. It's like we're taking that off of you, we're lightening a lot of your overhead costs by doing that. And we're creating a really upskilled far more than what you could do internally or have the resources to, pay time more than anything to develop people that way, to create a really powerful workforce, that's highly fulfilled and highly motivated.
And you still get the results at the bottom line, which is
And you get
obviously what we're all in business to
totally.
make money, but it can't just be a one-sided equation, right?
Exactly, and I think that's the thing is, like, you get the results, and I would say businesses now are getting the results, but they're not getting them as cost effectively or as quickly as they want them or as they could be getting them. There's
Mhm.
a lot. I've been across large corporate and into scale up or scaling companies, startup companies. Like, if someone's not into their job, they are not performing at the top level,
Yeah.
and I've seen that. We can pretend in tech like things are happening faster, but I have absolutely seen things are not happening faster. You're working harder to jump a lot more places in the same timeline, but it's still taking just as long, and that's why at League we are underpinned by proprietary technology, but we don't message it that way, because at the end of the day, we are a company based on we're human centered, we're human focused, because it's the people who, it doesn't matter what tech you bring in, it is the people who are driving that project, initiative, whatever it is, who make or break it, whether it's through politicking, whether it's through their on their way out to leave to another thing, it's this or that. Like, that's at the end of the day what makes things happen is people.
Mhm.
And so we're really focused on people, understanding people, knowing what people work together well, knowing what people want. I think that's the other thing is there's will and there's skill, and jobs in the hiring environment today just look at skill. They don't look at will. And sometimes your skill comes in question, but it's like it's actually just their will. They are perfectly capable of doing that, but they absolutely don't want to. And so really unpacking that in a way that just, cuts the bullshit, for lack of a better word. You're getting in with people what they want and where they really want to focus in an honest way, and then from company's perspective, you're giving them people who really want to be in that role and doing that type of work so that those outcomes are made.
I love it, and I love your passion. It totally shines through, and you're just making such an impact in the world of business, in the world of people. And I really, acknowledge you for that. And I wish you all the success. And I'm so looking forward to seeing where League goes in the next year and lots of years ahead. How can people get in touch with you if they wanted to connect with you and League?
Yes, please do. I'm on LinkedIn, so like always feel free to send a note from there. We have our website, a league.group, and we can post. I'll post some things. If you're following along, I'll just tag, how to get in touch with us as well. And we're on LinkedIn. You can follow us there. But honestly, at this point in our journey, just connections and referrals or recommendations. You have amazing people. You've got things you need, like, we are happy to have those kind of conversations. So please do reach out. I'm happy to talk anytime.
Awesome. We'll make those links in the show notes as well. But please reach out to Bri, connect with League. Bri is obviously, you can tell, super friendly and passionate. I would love to chat with you. And I think it is all about making connections. So that's how we connected. We connected through a mutual friend. And I'm so grateful for that. And it's been awesome getting to know you, Bri. So thank you so much for being on my podcast. I know we could talk a whole lot more, but I really appreciate all your wisdom, your insights, and all that you do in the world.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I obviously love any chat that we have. And so this was great.
Awesome. Thanks.